Chris Buescher puts the bumper to SVG on an iconic ending at Watkins Glen. Plus, it was a bad day to be a playoff driver. Let's recap it all. Welcome back to the Breaking Balls channel. It's Bob here. What a weekend for NASCAR at Watkins Glen. We had coverage of Connor Zilich's epic debut in the Xfinity Series on Saturday. Go ahead and check that out. And if you're new here, welcome in. Go ahead and subscribe. We are always talking NASCAR on a daily basis. We'll keep you in the loop for everything on the track, in the garage, and on the rumor mill. Today we're talking about Watkins Glen, though, an epic ending that saw Chris Buescher take home his first win of the season, second win for RFK as a team in 2024 after Brad Keselowski at Darlington, but in dramatic fashion. Buescher led with 10 to go, and then multiple late restarts and an overtime produced an epic finish where Shane Van Gisbergen took the lead and looked like he was on his way to his second NASCAR Cup Series victory. But no, sir, the man from Prosper, Texas, Chris Buescher, came through and put the bumper to SVG after SVG did touch the wall entering the bus stop turn and, well, got a little loose and out of shape there. Buescher put the bumper to him into the corner, and Buescher sails on to take the checkered flag. Now, like I said, multiple late restarts in overtime. I'm not yet willing to say it, but I'm almost to the point now where I do see the other side of the people arguing we just need to finish these races under yellow. It got to the point where it was a little just too much of itself, but we were rewarded because it looked like SVG was going to hunt down Chris Buescher with 10 to go. He was about 4 or 5 seconds back. Looked like that was going to be a great battle. We were robbed of, but in the end, we did get that battle in a 2-lap shootout between SVG and Chris Buescher. And listen, it was a clean bump at the end of the day. It was Rubbins racing. You saw Shane Van Gisbergen at the end shake Chris Buescher's hand in victory lane. They were on good terms there. You could tell there was no bad blood. These are two non-playoff drivers just racing for the win there. For Chris Buescher, he's had so many close calls. Kansas, where he came up and inch short to Kyle Larson. Darlington with Tyler Reddick a couple of months ago. Chris Buescher has had a lot of chances to lock himself in the playoffs, so it doesn't quite take away the sting of missing the playoffs. But he finally gets that checkered flag by his name on the car for the next 7 races of the playoffs to end the season. And I noted this earlier, but this is the first time both RFK drivers have won since Brad Keselowski has taken ownership, just showing that that team is in such a great direction moving forward after years and years of trending downward from a team that once was a powerful team. But I did say this earlier, 2 non-playoff drivers were the ones that were the factors at the end. Okay, Shane Van Gisbergen running a few races in the Cup Series part-time this year while he runs Xfinity, and Chris Buescher, a guy who was just on the edge of the playoff cut line. If you were a playoff driver, it was probably a bad day for you. I think NBC at the end of the broadcast said 10 of the 16 playoff drivers were caught up in some sort of incident or penalty today. It started on lap 1 where Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney both caught significant damage after it looked like, and I hate to place the burden of it on him, but Corey LaJoie did get a little squirrely heading into the bus stop chicane for the first lap, and just a few guys got taken out there. Ryan Blaney, Ricky Stenhouse. So the Ryan Blaney said he just had flat spots and NASCAR should have towed him back to pit road, and he seemed pretty irked about it. I'm sure there'll be more of that to come this week, but Ryan Blaney did have a good cushion coming into this week after a strong showing in the first playoff race at Atlanta, although Denny Hamlin, on the other part, rode around, coasted Atlanta, and ended up paying for it. Was in a tough spot in the playoff cut line, and it only got worse with that lap 1 wreck. Really was just mired all day, and then got caught up in another incident late in the race where he went 3 wide into the S's, ended up catching a lot of damage there, ended up finishing P21. We'll talk about the results in the playoff cut line, but for a lot of the race, Denny Hamlin was 15 to 20 points out of the playoff cut line. It's not where the 11 team thought they would be. It's not where anyone thought Denny Hamlin would be after 2 playoff races, but he even said with Atlanta, Watkins Glen, and Bristol, those are 3 very, very chaotic races to start the playoffs. So you've got to account for attrition, and the 11 team certainly hasn't, along with those 10 playoff penalty points they lost for that engine issue a few weeks ago. He was not the only playoff driver, though. I did say there was multiple. William Byron's car rode the rails at the S's and nearly went airborne there. Ended up getting a hold of Brad Keselowski's car and almost getting stuck into the driver's side window. A very scary looking wreck there. It was probably worse looking than it was, but you don't like seeing that, and for William Byron, it's a dangerous spot there with that metal wall there. You've seen cars in the past go over that wall, but you haven't seen it recently. It just kind of makes you think as a fan, oh, that is still possible. The dangers of Watkins Glen. We are not just at 100% safer barriers at these tracks yet still. a very dangerous moment for two playoff drivers there. But for Brad Keselowski, it was just the cherry on top of a day where even where he was late in the race running top 5, just had issues and issues and issues. 3 speeding penalties or issues on pit road. I think his tire is still wandering down the pit road at Watkins Glen. A tough day for Brad Keselowski, who I did note a couple weeks ago in our playoff preview was going to be at a disadvantage coming into this race. Nearly turned it into an advantage there late with the strategy call, but once again, stuck with new tires and fighting his way through an aggressive field. Not a good recipe there late in the race there, especially with the playoffs on the line. Christopher Bell spun twice today. He was caught up in that lap 1 incident with Blaney and Hamlin. He spun but was okay to continue. And then later in the race, tried to get down onto pit lane, and Austin Dillon was not feeling it. Life in the fast lane comes at you fast, Christopher Bell. And Bell ended up spinning right across Dillon's bumper almost at the pit road entrance there. A guy who is usually pretty good at road courses, Christopher Bell, just a quiet day for him overall. And another guy who is sneaky on road courses is Daniel Suarez, who ended up having a pretty decent day, but nearly ruined his whole team's day. Late in stage 2, when pole sitter Ross Chastain and SVG, who is going to be on Trackhouse's team next year, were running 1-2, they were about to pit right when Daniel Suarez went off the track and got caught in the gravel, brought out the caution literally just a turn before SVG and Chastain were about to hit the pits, nearly ruined their day. They had to stay out on old tires, and in a day where everyone was talking about, oh, Goodyear's brought this tire that's going to have 2-3 seconds of fall off, SVG and Ross Chastain were able to hold off the field for about 40 laps there before their tires gave way, and they did have to pit there. But for Daniel Suarez, just another playoff driver with an incident there. And then Martin Truex Jr. It wouldn't be the playoffs in an incident without Martin Truex Jr. on the list. He almost made it through the day. He won stage 1. That's big for the momentum there. But in one of those late restarts, got caught in a wreck, DNF'd, and you could just tell he was frustrated. On his post-race interview with NBC, I'm out. I'm checking out. I'll see you next week. You could tell he just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. Seems like anything that can go wrong for Martin Truex Jr. will go wrong in 2024. And for a guy who is almost surefire Hall of Famer, this is not the retirement tour he deserves by any means here. It's a shame to see because he has the race pace. I mean, he was on the front row with Ross Chastain to qualify. He had speed in that 19 Toyota, but just never could really put it together for the whole race there and ended up getting caught in a late incident there. 2 names I didn't mention, though, were guys that were thought to be probably first-round exits. Chase Briscoe, Austin Cindric. Well, in that playoff preview I had a couple weeks ago, I said those 2 guys were good at road courses. And boy, they cashed in on that today. Stage points were valuable. Both guys got stage points. Both guys finished top 10. For Chase Briscoe, he was 19 points out coming into today. Now he's over the cut line. He's safe right now going into Bristol. What a turn of events for that 14 team. Showed great speed today. Top 5 car, if you ask me, all day. And for Austin Cindric, he finally showed some road course pace again in the Cup Series. Austin Cindric, after 2 races, you could argue has been the most consistent playoff driver out of the entire field. If you had that on the bingo card, go ahead, email me the lotto numbers for next week. I would love to hear what that is because I would never in a million years have guessed Austin Cindric being one of the strongest playoff drivers through 2 weeks. But you've got to give credit to that 2 team. That is what they have been. Overall, just to look at some of the results, one thing that jumps out to me, I have to give credit to the Spire team. All 3 cars in the top 10. Corey LaJoie in the top 10. Zane Smith in the top 10. And Carson Hocevar, a top 3 finish running P3 and earned it there, holding off guys for multiple restarts at the end. Really, really strong for that young Spire team, showing that they are building something. And with Michael McDowell in that car next year, that's going to be interesting to see how they introduce him into that lineup. Something to note there that I don't think the broadcast covered is that Zane Smith and Michael McDowell did have a little incident on pit road afterwards. But again, credit to Spire. One team that I expected to be really fast coming into Watkins Glen because they have been historically the last few years was Hendrick Motorsports. No, not a factor today. William Byron was the winner at this race last year. Got caught up in that incident where he rode the guardrail and Brad Keselowski. Kyle Larson was a guy you expected to be pretty darn good today. Pit road penalty. Kind of mired his day, but he was never even close to being a top 10 car. Ended up finishing 12th and ended up salvaging the day. You know, Chase Elliott, where was he today? The self-proclaimed road course ringer, all his fans say. Chase Elliott didn't have a car that was competitive today, and neither was Alex Bowman. 18th for Bowman, 19th for Elliott, a day where Hendrick has just left scratching their heads leaving the track at Watkins Glen. And one other person that he did have a few spins, but it was just really the speed that I was shocked about was Tyler Reddick, probably the most consistent road course driver in the next gen era. Tyler Reddick was never a factor today at all. It was interesting to see how the field shook out today. It was not your usual suspects for the most part at the front of the field. You did have Michael McDowell. You did have SVG, of course. Chris Buescher is a sneaky road course guy. But the usual suspects like Elliott, Larson, Bell, none of those guys were up there today. It was really just an interesting race how it shook out today. I didn't think it was a bad race by any stretch. I did think the momentum was lost for a second there with all those late race restarts. But overall, this was just a good old-fashioned Watkins Glen race that produced an iconic finish. At the end of the day, you gotta love Watkins Glen. It's one of the best, if not best, road courses on the NASCAR calendar. Just the iconic backdrop with the Finger Lakes in New York, the historic track itself, and really it produces a lot of passing zones. It's not just a run-of-the-mill road course or anything like that. It really does produce great racing there. Now, I did touch on a few guys as far as their playoff standings, but let's look at the playoffs overall as a whole after two races, with one race remaining in the round of 16. Of course, Joey Logano locking himself in with that Atlanta win last week. Christopher Bell, Austin Cindric, Alex Bowman, even Daniel Suarez in a pretty good spot, I'd imagine, going into Bristol. It would take a catastrophic event and probably someone like a Harrison Burton or a Truex to win to really even maybe have an issue moving forward with any of those guys. Even Reddick and Elliott, 30 points to the good. Blaney, 29. Blaney, the fact that he's 29 to the good after DNFing on the first lap, that's impressive to me, the fact that he's built up enough points to be in that spot. But it just really says that all the other guys had attrition today too, I guess. Kyle Larson, 26 points. I guess he's okay. You'd like to see him and his teammate William Byron just a little bit higher to the cut line, just because at Bristol, all it takes is one incident and you're sweating the rest of the night if you have an early DNF. Briscoe, Gibbs, Hamlin, Keselowski, Truex, Burton. In theory, anyone can point themselves in, but anyone can point themselves out. All it takes is one bad move, one bad pit stop, a pit road penalty at Bristol, and that could be your night right there with as thin as the cut line is. For guys like Keselowski, Truex, and Burton, I think that the margin for error is a lot thinner than for Denny Hamlin. 6 points is a little bit easier to make up, especially with that being one of his best tracks. I mean, he did win there this spring, although it was with an illegal engine, thanks Toyota. But yes, I think Denny Hamlin, for all things considered, it could be worse. I think he really could be in a much worse position moving forward here. But again, Bristol next week, we will have all the coverage here at Breaking Balls. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, like this video. It helps us out a ton. We will keep you in the loop for everything NASCAR moving forward. Watkins Glen today, Chris Buescher holding off SVG and an absolute classic finish that we will see that bump and run for years to come, I'm sure. Up there with the Marcus Ambrose, Brad Keselowski finish. Lee Diffie, once again, masterful call there, even alluding to that race there for a brief moment on that last lap. But with Bristol next week, 4 drivers are going home and losing their championship potential. We'll keep you in the loop for everything here at Breaking Balls, but stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching.